St. Jerome has this quote, ignorance of Scripture is ignorance of God. So, in the spirit of St. Jerome, I'm not going to be preaching on the Scriptures, but on the Ratio. In reading the Ratio, it's just really helped me realize this is a really exciting time to be a Capuchin, especially a Capuchin in formation or working in formation. Because right now we're going through this rediscovery of our Capuchin identity. We're finding the balance between a diversity of gifts and expressions of the life and a common vision that gives us a communal identity, finding that balance. We discover ourselves individually and also as an order through relationship with the other. Because we're not isolated creatures, but we're relational creatures. The Ratio says, no man is an island. God has created us unique and unrepeatable, but not self-sufficient. Interdependence requires that we recognize others as different, and we welcome them as gifts that enrich us. Without free and open relationships, life lacks meaning, since it is in discovering otherness that our own identity is constructed. So maybe some of us, coming to Cap College, have discovered how we are different from other brothers and the different gifts we bring. And sometimes that can lead us into our vocation. How are we meant to serve the church? How are we meant to serve our brothers? How are we meant to love God? How do we speak with God? And then also the same thing on a grand scale, on an order scale. How are we different as Capuchins from, let's say, the Trappists, for example, or from the Dominicans, etc., etc. And so we sort of discover our place within the church through relationship with the other. The Ratio says, to welcome diversity in a brotherly way constitutes the most credible way of contemplating and telling the story of our God. And we as Capuchins have a unique way of telling the story of God, right? We're telling the story of God through a Franciscan lens to the world, so that the world might discover him. So this discovery of one's uniqueness that adds to one's diversity occurs both on that individual level and on that macro level of the order as a whole. Francis, when he wanted to begin his community and get his community approved, goes to Pope Honorius III, and Pope Honorius says, okay, what is your rule of life? How are you going to live this life communally? And Francis very piously goes, the gospel, right? I want to live the gospel life. And that's a wonderful, wonderful answer. But I think Pope Honorius III had some wisdom. And as a good formator, he said, okay, that's nice, but how are you specifically going to live that, Francis? This is enough, but how are you going to live the gospel? He recognized that Francis was onto something. He recognized that his community of brothers was onto something. So he said, how is your community going to specifically live the gospel? Which was a challenge to Francis to find his own identity individually, and then communally to find their own identity as Franciscans. And so Francis goes back and does a little more thinking about who are we, and then presents to him the rule. And from the rule, we've gotten the constitutions and the PCOs and all these meetings as we're continually discovering our identity and how we live this gospel way of life. I mentioned at the beginning that right now is a really exciting time to be a Capuchin in formation. You have Vatican II called religious to get back to their charisms. The Vatican II recognized that religious life has an amazing gift for the church. And Vatican II said, get back to living your charisms, rediscover your charism. You have 1981, the Capuchins devoted a PCO to formation. You have 1996, the church held a synod solely focused on consecrated life, and from that JP2 gave us the Vita Consecrata. You have 2013, we redid our constitutions. The Capuchins redid our constitutions. You have 2015, Pope Francis dedicated the year to consecrated life. 2019, the Ratio, and now we're in the midst of this Pan-American meeting. I mean, do you see the momentum that's really coming strongly from Vatican II? This is a really exciting time. We can really have this opportunity to help the order and the church rediscover what it means to be a Capuchin. To me, it's very exciting. One of the Ratio talks a lot about our identity and forming our identity, and one thing that it's very clear about certain elements that really make us Capuchin And one element it talks about is renewal, which is, how many Franciscan orders are there? God doesn't even know, because we're constantly looking for renewal. It says, a further category belonging to our charism is the concept of reform, understood as an existential need for continuous updating and renewal. It continues saying, a person discovers who he or she is when they launch out and start walking. Itinerancy is part of the deepest core of the human condition. It is this attitude that keeps us alert against conformity and compromise. From these, God protects us by enticing us with the gift of life that is always open and new. This model of itinerant life keeps us rooted in what is fundamental. So interesting, right? You have this concept of renewal, constantly searching for who we are, what is our identity. And then this concept of itinerancy, that we're not, I think we as Franciscans in a sense are just kind of never settled. We're always searching. We're always searching for how to serve God in the church. And I think we're also itinerant in trying to discover our identity. I'll end with this, that the Ratio does give, again, some clear descriptions of who we are as Capuchins, as what makes us Capuchin. I thought I would share them, because I appreciate how direct the Ratio is on this. It says, our Capuchin form of life is a gift of God to the church and the world. Capuchins themselves set themselves the task of rediscovering a more simple lifestyle, living in solitary places, but not isolated from people, in simple structures that did not compromise freedom, seeking silence whereby they could, as a brotherhood, listen to the gospel word and put it into practice at the service of the most humble. Brotherhood lived in minority, contemplative prayer, the care of and celebration of creation, attentive reading of the word, and the presence and service among the poor and suffering. That's some of the descriptions that the Ratio gives as the Capuchin form of life. So brothers, I end with saying that if we want to discover our charism, and we are in this time of rediscovering our charism, it is important for us to discover the gift that we have for the church, the gift that we have of our Capuchin life, to find our uniqueness, to find the diversity that the Capuchin order has to offer. And then once we discover the identity, to protect it. Because I do believe that as the Ratio says, our Capuchin form of life is a gift of God to the church and to the world. Amen.